So I promised that I would be back with a tutorial on how to make your own rose water toner. So let's get into it. First and foremost, your supplies. You need some organic roses. Do not go to Trader Joe's. These are for roses that you're growing or know that they are organic, meaning not treated with chemicals. Next, you'll need a large pot that's big enough for the amount of roses that you plan to process. I also recommend that you use distilled water. I'm going to be using alkaline water as well as witch hazel, preferably with no alcohol in it. You can also include any essential oils that you would like. And you'll need a sterilized jar. This is my glass jar I'll be using. Alternatively, if you don't have one of those, you can use a plastic bottle. And you'll also need a sprayer or some kind of closure or lid to, of course, seal your container. Your first step is to gently rinse your roses with some lukewarm water and also remove the stems. This may take a little time. I'm actually gently doing that and then moving the petals to a glass container that I'll use for the final rinse that you'll see in just a moment. But just take time to be thorough. There may be some little critters hanging out in your roses, so just give yourself some time to do that well. I also like to do another rinse of all the petals once I've done all the separation from the stems, just to get everything really, really clean. And again, even if it's to rinse out the pollen and whatever may be hanging in there. So you'll see that here. And then you're ready to move on to the next step, which is to add your roses to your pot. And then you're going to cover your roses with your water, just enough to cover your roses, just slightly. If you overdo it, then you'll dilute your rose water. So it's always better to have a more concentrated formula. And you can just gently mash them down to see how much additional coverage you need. But less is more, although you don't want to just do a couple of drops of water, obviously, because you'll end up with burnt roses. But you're going to do that, and then you're going to allow your roses to simmer on the stove on low to medium heat, and you can stir them periodically. You're going to allow that to simmer for 20 to 30 minutes. And as you stir and check your pot, I recommend that you, once it gets hot, that you cover it for a while. But it's okay to check in and stir occasionally as your roses are simmering. And it's pretty special to see how they change over time. So you'll notice that they're going to get more and more pale. And what you're watching for is to allow them to simmer enough that they get to a really, really, really light pale color, meaning that they've lost their heat, the majority of their color. And so now that we have simmered our roses long enough to remove the color from them, the next step is to actually drain them. I'm using a glass container, but you want to drain them and allow them to cool. In this case, I allowed it to cool overnight since I was using a pretty large amount of roses and water. So once you've had the opportunity for it to cool, then the next step and the most fun part is to move on to mixing it all up. So I have already started my mix, but I start off with my funnel, of course. I've got some rosemary extract and some essential oils that I've already put into my bottle. I've already added some witch hazel as an option. If you want this to be a little more cool and refreshing, add some seltzer water. So I've already done that as well for this particular one. And next up is to add the rose water to my bottle and to shake it all up. You can completely skip the option of adding in the witch hazel and seltzer water or essential oils if you're just interested in making rose water. You know, ending with the process of cooling it off and then bottling it is perfectly okay. And so now the final step in our process is to enjoy it. So every morning and even every night, I use my rose water toner as a nice and refreshing step. Now, sometimes, as you notice, I spray it in my hair. Learned that from one of my friends who does that. But this is my tutorial on how to make your own rose water toner, reminding you that there are things in your yard and in your garden that you can use for your own skincare and medicinal purposes. And if you're using organic gardening, then it's perfectly healthy for you to do that. Now, if you're still fertilizing and using chemicals, this is not recommended. But I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned to see what I come up with next. If you have any special requests, let me know.